welcome to the regular Bellevue City Council meeting for June 21st, 2021. I have Councilmember Lee wants to be excused from the meeting tonight. He is not able to attend. And Councilmember Robertson is going to join us late. So is there a motion to excuse Councilmember Lee?
I move to excuse Councilmember Lee from tonight's meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. City Clerk, could you do the roll call, please?
Mayor Robinson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Thank you. As we heard, Councilmember Lee is excused from tonight's meeting. Councilmember Robertson will be joining us shortly. Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Barksdale, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Will do. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you. This evening, there are 3 pre-registered speakers for oral communications. And with that, the first speaker is Alex Smith. Mr. Smith, can you hear me?
Yes, I just unmuted. Can you hear me, Charmaine?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
All right. I wish to thank all of the City Council members and City of Bellevue staff for studying the issue that I'm bringing to the council this evening, which is a proposed revision to the LUCA for sequence 1. I am arguing for the ability to extend the boundary of the East Side Center neighborhood to I-405. Currently, it extends under sequence 1 to 110th. And the purpose for this is to allow my property at 700 112th to enjoy the transfer of FAR as it relates to excess bonus FAR along the pedestrian corridor now known as the Grand Connection. It seems like there's an inconsistency between the boundary for the neighborhood and this proposed LUCA amendment. The arguments and will be made also by our land use attorney, Larry Martin, from a code amendment perspective. Essentially, the materials that we had forwarded to the council members outline which part of the LUCA 20.25a 0.070F and just changing the one detail of crossing out 112th Avenue and replacing that with I-405. So the process would just involve the city council making a motion to modify that one portion of the amendment. And that is all I care to share with you this evening. So again, thank you for your attention on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. The next speaker is Caitlin Heinen. And Ms. Heinen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, thank you. Your time begins now.
Good evening, council members. My name is Caitlin Heinen, and I'm a staff attorney for the King County Bar Association's Housing Justice Project. And I'd like to comment this evening on discussion of the eviction moratorium update. Specifically, I'd like to remind council members that our clinics at HJP, we provide free legal aid to low-income renters facing eviction in King County. And so I'm calling today to impress upon this council the urgent importance of passing stronger renter protections at the local level and quickly before the state moratorium is set to expire at the end of this month. At the end of last year, HJP provided $96,000 in rental assistance to Bellevue residents in just a 6-week period. Right now, HJP is providing $3 million in rental assistance to all of King County's residents. But it's important to note that these funds came from the second COVID relief package passed by Congress last year between Christmas and New Year's. Organizations like HJP throughout Washington state have not even discussed distributing the rental assistance by the new administration in the America Rescue Plan passed earlier this year. And this is exactly why we need the help of municipalities like Bellevue in ensuring that the expiration of eviction moratoria does not undercut the federal and state government's efforts to make landlords whole and to keep tenants housed. For more context, HJP received almost double the amount of calls from Bellevue renters during the pandemic than the year prior. Bellevue made up 2.7% of eviction filings in King County, which may not seem like a lot, but we estimate 1,620 households in Bellevue are currently at risk for eviction after June 30th. That means up to 4,860 individuals may be forced to enter Bellevue's homelessness system if these individuals aren't able to find alternative housing themselves. Finally, on April 22nd, Washington state became the first state in the nation to guarantee a right to counsel to low-income tenants facing eviction. 10 weeks between April 22nd and June 30th is simply not enough time to recruit, hire, train, and deploy enough eviction defense attorneys to meet the massive need for legal assistance in evictions. In fact, HJP will be doubling its attorneys on staff in order to prepare for the eviction tsunami, the eviction avalanche that we've been hearing about on the other side of these COVID-19 eviction moratoria. So I'd like to encourage council members to implement its own local moratorium, provide a defense to eviction for COVID-related rent debt, and or pass long-lasting tenant protections going into this uncertain future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heinen. The final speaker pre-registered for this evening is Larry Martin. And Mr. Martin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Larry Martin. I'm a land use attorney with Davis Wright Tremaine. We're in Bellevue at 929 108th Avenue Northeast. I'm representing Alex Smith in connection with his property, the 700 LLC property located on the east side of 112th Avenue Northeast. It's right across from Maidenbauer Center and the new downtown light rail station. I'm addressing item 12 on your agenda, which is proposed ordinance 6580, the Grand Connection Land Use Code Amendment. Like Alex, I'm asking you to make one modification to the ordinance to correct an error. The error occurs on page 5 in the definition of the eastern boundary of the area within which bonus FAR awarded for construction of the Grand Connection or a major public open space may be transferred. And that's kind of technical, but the downtown amenity incentive system, as you will recall, provides an incentive to property owners to construct the pedestrian corridor, or now to be named the Grand Connection, or a major public open space. And that incentive is to award bonus FAR. And if those property owners can't use it all on their own development, they're permitted to transfer it within a certain area. And the land use code says that for this amenity incentive system, it's to be implemented according to neighborhood boundaries. And the neighborhood boundary here is the East Side Center neighborhood, and extends on the east side to I-405. And the error here is an old carryover provision in the code says that the transfer area extends to 112th Avenue Northeast. And therefore it's not following the neighborhood boundary. And the result of the error is that 4 properties that are on the east side of 112th, but in the neighborhood, are excluded from this benefit. They're not able to transfer FAR to their properties. So we're just asking that you make one correction on the page 5 of your ordinance. It's ordinance 6580, item 12. There's a quoted code section there on page 5, and in the 4th line, we're asking that you correct the error by eliminating 112th as a boundary and substituting in I-405. This will bring those 4 properties that have been improperly excluded from the FAR transfer area back into the area, and it will correct it'll be then consistent with the land use code. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Martin. That is the end of our pre-registered list. At this point, I would ask if there are any other individuals who wish to make comment to the City Council. Please use the raise hand function or *9 if you are connected with a phone. And Mayor, there are no additional hands.
Okay, thank you. Can you see me okay? I'm on with my computer. Okay. So next up is the report of the city manager, and he's going to give us an update on the eviction moratorium. If we have questions on this, I would like to direct you to email him after the meeting tonight to answer your questions. We're not going to have discussion here on this, but this is just information only. So Mr. Miyake.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. And thank you, Mayor, for that quick introduction. As you mentioned, this is a brief status report on the information request that came out of last week's council meeting under council business related to a temporary moratorium ordinance request on residential tenant evictions to bridge the resource gap in the event the government does not extend the statewide moratorium by June 30th. At the meeting, these information requests were essentially a legal analysis of the request, implications of such an action, information on the population at risk for housing insecurity, information about the needed rental assistance, as well as resources to respond to this need, and an assessment of the recent state legislation on eviction protections and purposes. For purposes of next week's council meeting, which is on June 28th, the staff plan to bring back a draft ordinance, as well as discuss with council our legal analysis. We'll also provide an overview of the 2021 legislation related to eviction protections. And we'll also provide high-level information responding to your requests specifically about Bellevue that will largely need to be extrapolated from information collected by others such as the state and human service providers, as well as relevant staff work and information collected by our mediation group. Mayor, this represents the status report as is this evening. And I will conclude and look forward to any questions after the council meetings that the council members may ask of me.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have council business and new initiatives. And Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the one we have tonight?
This next item is under council business is on the Best Start for Kids levy. This one was a request that was made by the council members upon a presentation that was made by King County around a month or two ago. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Charmaine Arredondo, our city clerk, to talk about some of the requirements for the council to take a position on this particular levy.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake. At this point, there is no discussion item tonight. The decision of the council will be to decide whether or not to take a position at a future meeting. So if the council wishes to take a position at a future meeting, that meeting would be July 12th, and state law dictates the process, and it is laid out in your agenda memo. The county would come and give a factual presentation. The pro and con committees would be invited to make would have equal opportunity to make a presentation. And then citizens would be able to comment either for or against a ballot measure. And then the council could vote on a resolution at that time.
So this is a vote to determine whether or not we want to take a position at the July 12th meeting on the Best Starts for Kids levy.
Yes.
So is there a motion?
Yes, there is, Mayor. I move that on its July 12th, 2021 regular meeting, the council vote on a resolution to take a position on King County Proposition Number 1 on the primary election ballot, the regular property tax levy for children, youth, families, and communities, and allow 10 minutes each for the campaign supporting and opposing the ballot measure to provide testimony, and allow individuals 15 minutes per side to speak in favor and in opposition to the ballot measure, each speaker to have no more than 3 minutes to speak.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that will come back on July 12th. Thank you. Next, we have the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We do have a public hearing tonight. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce that?
Sure, Mayor. The public hearing in front of you this evening is for the relinquishment of a water easement as a part of a redevelopment project at 13620 Southeast Eastgate Way. This matter was last in front of council on May 3rd of 2021, where the easement was declared surplus and the date for tonight's public hearing was set. Following the public hearing, council will be asked to take an action on the proposed resolution to relinquish the surplus easement. Joining us this evening for a brief staff report are Ira McDonald, our real property manager out of Finance and Asset Management Department, as well as Daniel Munez, real property agent as well. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ira.
Thank you, Mr. Miyake, and good evening, Mayor and council members. Our staff report tonight is regarding a request to release a water easement located at 13620 Southeast Eastgate Way. I'll provide a brief staff report, after which council will hold a public hearing to allow the public an opportunity to comment on the release. And following the hearing, we ask that council votes on a resolution authorizing the release. This is a vicinity map. Again, the property is at 13620 Southeast Eastgate Way. The property is being redeveloped, and our old water line, which is shown here in orange highlighting, it conflicts with the development plans. The property is currently owned by King County. They are in the process of selling the site to developers who will construct low-income housing, supportive housing, and a homeless shelter on this parcel. The existing publicly owned water main will be abandoned, and the affordable housing developer will construct a new privately owned water main to serve the property. A new water meter will be placed just to the north of this property inside the public road right-of-way for Southeast 32nd Street, so no publicly owned water facilities will remain inside the easement. The developer has requested a release of this easement, and the Utilities Department has confirmed that there will be no future need for the easement. If approved, the release will be executed and recorded following abandonment of the water line. Following the public hearing, staff requests council action on the proposed resolution authorizing the release of this easement. This ends the staff report. Are there any questions before opening the public hearing?
Any comments or questions? All right, I move, no, is there a motion to open the public hearing?
You can do it if you want to.
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, is there anybody signed up for public comment?
Thank you, Mayor. No, there are no pre-registered speakers for the public hearing. So at this point, I would ask if there is anyone connected to this call who wishes to make comment during this public hearing related to the water easement release. Please use the raise hand function or *9 if you are connected with a phone. And Mayor, there are no hands raised.
Okay, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
There is, Mayor. I move to adopt resolution 9958, authorizing the execution of documents necessary to release an existing water main easement located at 13620 Southeast Eastgate Way, which has been declared surplus to the city's needs and no longer required for providing continued public utility service.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you. All right, next study session items. We have one. This is a report back on the police use of force. Mr. McCommon.
So, hey, Mayor, I was going to go ahead and do a quick introduction here for you.
Yeah, go ahead,
If
please.
you don't mind. As you mentioned, this is a progress report on the recommendations identified in the Office of Independent Review Police Use of Force report, which was presented to Council on April 12th of this year. And by way of background, on June 11th of 2020, Mayor Robinson, along with the Council, pledged to review the police use of force policies to identify any potential reforms. And with that, I'll go ahead to turn it over to Deputy City Manager Nathan McCommon to give the progress report. And just to mention, this is informational. No formal direction is being requested by the council this evening. Nathan?
Thank you, City Manager Miyake. And Mayor, if you would just confirm for me that you can see the slide. Yes. Is the slide up? Yes. Yep. Okay. Thumbs up. Very good. Well, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, and Council, it is a pleasure to speak this evening to share with the Council and the general public what is happening as a result of the consultant's recommendations that came out of the Council's pledge to review police use of force policies. Now, this presentation is for information only, as City Manager Miyake mentioned, and no action is needed this evening. After I share some historical context, I will describe what actions we can expect going forward. It has been 1 year, as City Manager Miyake mentioned, since the Council unanimously issued the pledge on June 11, 2020, in response to the murder of George Floyd. A leading concern at the time was to ensure that the use of force policy in Bellevue would contain no guidance that might lead to an unacceptable use of force. As a brief review of the pledge, you see on the screen that the Council's commitments were divided into 4 steps, 3 of which are completed through the work of the Office of Independent Review Group, significant participation from the public, and support by city staff. The focus of the work was examining the use of force policy to include a diverse range of input, experiences, and stories. On April 12th this year, the consultant presented its findings and recommendations, which launched step 4 of the pledge to reform police use of force policies. Immediately after receipt of the final report, staff began planning how the city could move forward successfully with the consultant's recommendations. We are taking the final step of the pledge very seriously, and over the course of the next year, we will be making advancements on the recommendations. As Council is also aware, this year, the governor signed into law several bills that impact policing policies and practice. Some of these new laws require near-term work by staff to comply with the effective date of July 24, 2021. And I must say that from the City Attorney's Office and the Police Department perspective, that the work to meet that deadline is demanding significant staff resources. I also point out that a handful of the new laws overlap with the consultant's recommendations, but not all of them. As Council is aware, collective bargaining is also needed for implementation of some of the legislation and OIR recommendations. The city is currently working on policies and procedures to accomplish these, many of which will be presented to the union leadership where required. After July 24, we will then have more staff capacity to accelerate work on the consultant's recommendations. Going forward, Police Administration plans to return to Council on a quarterly basis with progress reports on advancing farther down the list of the recommendations. The goal is to finish the work by June of 2022. And I will point out too that the Police Department will continue to welcome and engage the public in consultation on policing practices in Bellevue to remain transparent, improve service, and build community trust. To date, 7 of the recommendations are already completed. On this and the next slide, I list the recommendation number and text of those 7. Regarding the 40 that are before us, these are our commitment over the next year. And thus, when Police Administration reports quarterly on progress to the Council, it will be on these 40. As an example, the Council approved funding for police cameras in the current budget. The OIR group also reported unanimous support from the community for cameras. While the final equipment types and associated use policy have yet to be determined, the city has a good path forward for implementing cameras and satisfying recommendation number 37 in this case. So there will be more to come at a future council meeting on advancement of the remaining 40 recommendations. I'll quickly touch on the 7 that are completed. So looking at your screen, there are 3 on this one, and de-escalation was a big concern in the community feedback, and a de-escalation policy is now completed. The OIR group acknowledged that the Bellevue Police Department trained on it and used it in practice, but needed a published policy. Recommendation number 6 also relates to de-escalation and recognizing officers who use de-escalation well. And number 10 recommends that the duty of loyalty policy be removed. Now the remaining department policy is clear and consistent with department practice that an officer's first duty is to the community. Recommendations 14, 21, 41, and 42 are for transparency purposes and now are clearly published online. The illustration on your screen shows the sequence of actions that I've been describing in this presentation. Today is represented by the green circle in the center. Before the green circle is 1 year, and after the green circle is 1 year. So starting at the left, 1 year ago, the council issued the pledge. The OIR group led the review of police use of force policies and conducted the community engagement. The consultant then presented its recommendations in April this year. And today we are looking forward to making advancements on the final step of the council's pledge and are eager to learn from police administration during the coming quarterly updates. Again, the goal is to have achieved the council's intent with its pledge by June of 2022. This presentation again is for information only to help the council and the public anticipate what will come next on advancing the council's pledge. I would like to offer thanks to the council also for its continued support ever since launching the pledge. After all, self-examination at this level can be difficult. I also want to thank the community for its robust participation. The consultant reported that the numbers and variety of communications exceeded typical levels of participation in other cities. The public actually affected the outcome of the final report for the better. And with that, I will turn the meeting back over to Mayor Robinson.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is just for information, but are there any comments or questions? I can see everybody. I see Councilmember Barksdale, Stokes, and then Zahn. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. It's good to see the progress on this. Just a couple questions. As changes are made to the policies, are they getting pushed out to the community? And then the second question, for the body worn cameras, are we working on the policy in advance of getting the cameras so that when we get them, we're a little bit ahead and ready to deploy them, use them?
So I know that Chief Milet is on the line, and I don't mean to put him on the spot, but he's in a position to respond to those.
Thank you, Mr. McCollum, and good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, Mr. Miyagi. To answer your question, Councilman Barksdale, yes and yes. Yes, we plan on putting the information out through to the community by way of updates to the City Council. If there is another way or method that the council desires us to put the information out, we will. Transparency is at the foundation of everything that we do. But yes, we will definitely put information out to the public. And in terms of working on the policy in advance of the actual arrival of the cameras, my hope and my plan is to have everything laid out and ready to go. So when the cameras arrive, that we are able to go live as quickly as possible. There's a lot of processes that we need to accomplish to include engaging the union, but also doing a community engagement piece to that as well. And we're working on that. We are filling a project coordinator position. It's been advertised, and I'm hoping that we'll get some tremendous interest and get that person identified so they can help us lead the charge in getting this in place.
Awesome, thank you. I guess in terms of the communication, similar to how we push out notifications through the various channels, I think it'd be good to
Yes, sir.
updates, not every single one, but maybe on some regular cadence.
Sure, absolutely, we can do that.
Councilmember Stokes. Oops.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I thought I'd just add one tag. So we also have opportunity on the quarterly reports to make announcements of those things.
And if I may add one more thing, we continue to do town hall meetings virtually. And as soon as we get out of COVID, we're planning on doing more in person and through those forums as well. As you laid out, all the different communication methods we will use to get information out. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I just wanted to first thank city manager and staff and the police chief and staff for continuing this and working through this. Actually, you've accomplished a lot in a fairly short time period, which is, I think, sometimes doesn't happen on these type of things, not just with the police, but other things as well. So I want to commend you for working steadily on this, and just to let the public know that where we're going and how transparent we are. Can you describe or have someone describe how the information on the 7 that we've already accomplished and the others, how they're going and what opportunities there are for input and that kind of thing? And let people know that anybody wants to find out what the police department's working on, what the city's working on, they can find out and have, ask questions. It's really open and transparent, and I appreciate that. And I think we're making great strides.
So yes, sir, we will put out information that we will continue to accept and solicit input into the OIR's report. Through the listening sessions that OIR did, and Mr. McCommon, I think it was well over 1,000 communications that they received in written form through the different forums that they held. So we've heard from the public, but again, we constantly are going out and asking for information and feedback, and we'll continue to do that as we use the different communication tools to send out updates where we are with progress. Again, as Mr. McCommon focused a comment on earlier on, we are really focused our efforts on right now is making sure that we're in compliance with the changes in state law. And there is some overlap, but not a lot with the OIR report. So that's got to take priority right now, and it has taken priority, but we are still working on the OIR report simultaneously, but the state law mandates take priority at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chief, for the information. It's really, really helpful. And, the transparency and having everything online centered on the community, which is really the key. That's why we're here. I appreciate the fact that we're hiring the project coordinator position to do the community outreach. Couple of questions, I guess maybe in a comment. One is the timing of the cameras and when we think that will actually be launched. And then when I was thinking about the annual report, I know we already have an annual report for the police that we do every year. So is the intent that as we move forward that we're not having 3 different reports, right? One overall one, and then one on the use of force, and then this other professional standards, that they would be consolidated into one document then that would go out to the community so that it's as easy as possible to have everything in one place. I know that right now we're putting pieces in, and so we're not quite there yet, but I guess that would be my comment, is to the degree we can have everything in one place, it would be a lot easier to find information. And I think that's helpful for everyone. And the reason I asked about the timing of the cameras is that I think that absolutely the community engagement will be so important, because when I think about cameras, there's always going to be the question about privacy or people getting filmed. And so the more that there's an understanding of that, just because it's something brand new to our community, And there just may be a lack of understanding about how all of that works as we develop a policy. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We will be seeking feedback from the community as we build our policy and before we launch the project. I can tell you stories of other large cities that implemented camera programs without community input, and it kind of blew up in their face. And it was lessons learned that we're going to capitalize on. And so we will be putting that request out for information from the community while at the same time doing education. There are a lot of legal requirements that we have to meet. And then there's also best practice. And I turn to Kalia and our accreditation team to make sure that whatever policies we have in place are the best in the industry. And again, working alongside the unions and such as we craft it. The second part of your question, where we can consolidate, we will. But what we found is that in the annual report document itself, it's 28, 30 pages long. Adding more documents in there, it causes people frustration because they want to get straight to what they want. And so we always incorporate some of the information that OIR recommended we publish on our website. Some of it was already in our annual report, but what they were recommending was a standalone data portal. So if somebody really doesn't want to know about what we did in the patrol, this past year and some of the accomplishments, they only want to go to what they want. I understand what you're saying, consolidate as much as we can and just have one, but we'll evaluate it. And again, we'll get our customers' feedback as well. I think it's a great recommendation, but we'll solicit input from the customers as well.
Yeah. So maybe it's a yes and, right?
Yes, yes.
Those that really want to dig in, there's a place for them to go look at everything. And then those that want the consolidated, there's a place for that too, because, people digest data in different ways. And then our ability to take data into information, into insights, which then help us be even better, will be really important.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation, Nathan. Thank you. Chief Milet, thank you for being here tonight. And thank you to your entire department, as been said before, for their willingness and transparency and willing to go through this process. I think, as Nathan said, it can always be difficult to, self-examine when somebody going through a process like this, but it's important that we do. But on the other hand, as far as I've been on this council, it's no different than what this department has done all the time, or has always tried to achieve in terms of being very transparent, in terms of always listening to residents. And I really want to give a shout out to the residents that played a major role in this process as well. Thank you for taking the time to engage and to talk about your experience with our police department. I think going through this process is only going to make our police department better. It truly is. And it certainly highlighted a few things that we need to clean up. The 47 number, for some folks, joining us tonight for the first time, that might seem like a lot, but I would also say that a lot of these things tend to be more administrative or updating manual policies. The department might have been doing these things already, but it wasn't explicit in the policy. And I don't get me wrong, we should have it explicit in the policy, and it should be posted on the website, those reports and everything else. So this is only going to make the department much stronger overall. But again, I just really commend you and the entire department for that willingness to go through this OIR report process. And I think we're going to end up being even stronger on the other side once we get through all 47. I had one question, and it was principally kind of brought up by what Nathan had said about the de-escalation. That came up numerous times during this whole process and engagement, and I think part of it was education too. If you've never had any interaction with the police, why would you be curious about the de-escalation policies? But what is the core difference between what OIR has suggested in terms of de-escalation versus CALEA, or versus what we were already doing as a department? Was there much of a difference, or was it really just some minor tweaks and again updating a policy?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. There was no change. It was just taking what we were doing in practice, okay, and creating a policy for it. And I agree with you, sir, that, you know, and I want to thank the council for your willingness to sign on to the pledge, because I do believe that it strengthens our policy. And we are used to self-examination through CALEA, and we're constantly doing that. But to answer your question, no, sir, we've been doing de-escalation long time, and it was just the realization that we don't have it in our formal policy. It's in all of our training manuals, everything that we do. So their recommendation, that one specifically was solid, right on, and we got it done right away. We're actually doing it, getting ready to launch the policy.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chief Millett.
Thank you, sir.
So, Chief, I really appreciated when we embarked on this, how you embraced the recommendation that came from the community that we evaluate our policies. And it was so good to have you on board with that and to participate in the process. I'm wondering, has there been any pushback from the department on any of the recommendations that have come from the consultants?
No, ma'am. There's pushback. No, there's questions. There's trying to understand what the recommendation was and how it fits in best practice. There is really only one recommendation that we acknowledge, but we're not going to choose to publish on our website some information. And I can go into more detail with that if anybody has questions. But other than that, there's clarification. There may be modification, as Mr. Giannakko said in his presentation. His expectation was that, you know, we would take these recommendations and customize them to our use. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he would have been shocked if we would have taken every single one of the recommendations. It's for us to challenge ourselves and to see if it fits with best practice and what the community needs, to include what our officers need.
So after some period of time, will there be any reassessment? Will there be anybody who comes back and kind of gives an assessment of the new recommendations and how they've been implemented to make sure that we are doing everything we want to be doing?
Mr. McCommon, I'll kick that back over to you. You know, there will be an assessment. We are evaluated by CALEA constantly. And what they did about 4 years ago, it was a 3-year evaluation cycle. They made it 4. And every year is almost like a mini on-site or a mini evaluation. So we will incorporate the changes to OIR, and they will fit nicely with our CALEA standards. And if there's any conflict, we will find out there, you know, if there's issues, and we can modify them as needed. But Mr. Common, I'll take it back over to you if you're okay with that.
Actually, Chief, yeah, that answer is accurate. And at the end of this coming year, after 4 quarterly reports, there will be a chance to reflect on what has been accomplished at that point and be able to incorporate it into the accreditation process.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, we have a land use quasi-judicial rezone. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce that?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Robinson, council members. As you mentioned, the matter in front of you this evening is a rezone application on behalf of the corporation SRM for the development for a parcel located at 100 Bellevue Way Southeast. As you mentioned, this is a process 3 quasi-judicial matter, and tonight will be the council's initial consideration of this particular item. Tonight, council will hear a brief staff report, and we'll have the opportunity to ask questions, if any. No action is being sought by council this evening. Staff will return at a future meeting tentatively set for July 12th for final action. Joining us this evening is Kathy Gerla, City Attorney, as well as Liz Stead, our Land Use Director, and Mark Brennan, Senior Planner, both from the Development Services Department. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kathy for ex parte disclosures first. Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening, Council. As Mr. Miyake indicated, this is a process 3, which means that the hearing examiner makes a recommendation and the council makes the final decision. The hearing examiner has recommended approval and there was no appeal filed. So before I turn it over to Ms. Stead and Mr. Brennan to give a presentation and an overview of the rezone application proceeding, what I do want to do, Mayor, is suggest that because this is quasi-judicial and therefore subject to the appearance of fairness doctrine, that each council member be given an opportunity to disclose on the record any ex parte, communications that they may have had with any person supporting or opposing the project. And council staff have already looked in your council email boxes, so you would only need to disclose if you had something other than what's in your council email boxes.
So do you want to go ahead and ask, or would you like me to?
It's fine, Mayor, for you too, and I don't think we need to go through individually. If people have ex parte, they can simply disclose.
Okay, so I'm going to call on each person and you can tell me yes or no if you've had any ex parte contacts. Councilmember Zahn.
None.
Councilmember Barksdale.
No.
Councilmember Stokes.
Nope.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis.
No.
And no, I have neither.
And neither has Councilmember Robertson.
Ah, you're here.
Yes, but I can't join my video, sorry.
Okay, thank you for letting us know you're here. Okay, so that's 6 of us.
With that, I will turn it over to Ms. Stead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis. Thank you for having us here this evening. We are here joined by Mark Brennan, who's an associate planner in land use, and he'll be giving you a presentation that he originally presented to the hearing examiner on this rezone. As you know, any decisions that you make will be based on the record, so you will be seeing the same PowerPoint that was presented to the hearing examiner when we gave our recommendation to them. I'm going to go ahead and just quickly go over this. This is almost a cleanup rezone. The parcel is fully located within the downtown boundary. The downtown boundary had been changed in 2020, so this is really just bringing it into compliance with the comprehensive plan. But I will go ahead and turn this over to Mr. Brennan, the other Mr. Brennan, as we call him in our department. He gets a lot of emails meant for Mike, which is sometimes unfortunate, but he handles it with grace. So I will be sharing my screen to start the PowerPoint and turn it over to Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and City Council members. My name is Mark Brennan, and I am the land use planner who managed this permit. I'm here this evening to present the 100 Bellevue rezone for your consideration. And Liz, I am not seeing the presentation yet.
Oh. Okay, just one moment. It says it's sharing. Let me go ahead and stop and I will try again. My apologies, people. I thought I was doing something I was not doing. So let me try this again. How's that?
No, maybe you should email that. Oh, there it is. You got it.
There we go.
Good, thank you. My apologies.
Thanks, Liz. The applicant is proposing a site-specific rezone of the parcel at 100 Bellevue Way. The site currently is split zoned between a downtown mixed use or DTMU land use district on the north portion of the site and an office or O land use district on the south portion of the site. The proposal would rezone the office portion of the site to the DTMU land use district, resulting in a single designation of DTMU over the entire site. This rezone is proposed for consistency with the comprehensive plan amendment designation adopted in December of last year. This map shows the parcel is located along the east side of Bellevue Way, south of Main Street. The former Jack in the Box restaurant is located to the north of the parcel. As you can see on this map, the parcel is currently split zoned between the downtown mixed use district as shown in orange and the office district as shown in yellow. The rezone will remove the office zone and extend the DTMU zone over the entire parcel, thereby creating consistency with the previously adopted comprehensive plan designation for the parcel. Notice of application and public meeting was published on February 11th of this year. A public notice sign was installed on the site that day, and notice was also mailed to property owners within 500 feet of the subject property. The city held a public meeting on March 3rd of this year for the project. No one from the public attended the meeting, and there have been no party record comments. Notice of recommendation, notice of public hearing was published on April 29th. And subsequent to that, the hearing examiner held a public hearing for the rezone on May 20th and subsequently published a report recommending council approval of the application. The proposal has met 5 criteria for land use approval as shown. It will be consistent with the comprehensive plan. It will bear substantial relation to public health, safety, or welfare. It is warranted in order to achieve consistency with the comprehensive plan. It will not be materially detrimental to uses or property in the immediate vicinity of the subject property, and it has merit and value for the community as a whole. The director has recommended approval of the proposed rezone, and the hearing examiner adopted that recommendation. The hearing examiner found that the proposal will achieve consistency with the comprehensive plan, and the applicant has met all decision criteria as fully documented in the hearing examiner report located in the packets provided for you. The hearing examiner also adopted the following condition as proposed by the director. Per Land Use Code Part 2030A, the approval of this rezone does not constitute an approval of any land use entitlement review or any other ancillary permits that may be required for the design and construction of any proposed development or improvements on this rezone site. Thank you for your consideration of the 100 Bellevue rezone. Are there any questions?
Thank you. So does anybody have questions or comments? I am not seeing any, and this is informational only. So thank you for the presentation.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, we have an ordinance tonight, 6580, Mr. Miyake.
So thank you, Mayor and council members. In front of you this evening is an ordinance to amend the downtown land use code to add new Grand Connection design guidelines and standards and accompanying conformance amendments. Just by way of background, the Grand Connection is a council priority to implement the major placemaking feature that connects the Maybar Bay Park through downtown Bellevue to the Wilburton area. The Grand Connection route is separated into 2 sequences. Sequence 1 addresses the area from Old Bellevue through downtown to the east end of the transit center. And that is sequence 1 is the focus for this land use code amendment being adopted tonight. Sequence 2 encompasses the area of 110th Avenue Northeast and includes the crossing of I-405 to the Wilburton area and the East Trail. Work on sequence 2 is part of the council's priority for the 21-23 priorities that you adopted. This matter was last in front of council on May 17th, where the Planning Commission recommended adoption of the land use code and where the council directed staff to bring back the code for adoption this evening. Action to adopt the ordinance for Grand Connection design guidelines and standards is what is the direction that is needed by council this evening. Joining us this evening for a brief staff report is Emil King, our Assistant Director of Community Development, Liz Stead, who was also just joined us, Land Use Director of Development Services, and Christina Gallant, Senior Planner of Development Services. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Emil.
Thank you for the introduction, City Manager Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, members of council. Tonight, we've reached a significant milestone on the work on the Grand Connection. Council is being asked tonight to adopt the Grand Connection Sequence 1 guidelines. As the city manager described, this defines the ground level improvements that are going to implement the Grand Connection from 110th Avenue Northeast west to Old Bellevue. As described in the council vision and framework plans, the Grand Connection is a key part of Bellevue being a livable city and supporting our economic development and mobility options for residents, workers, and visitors. Some of the things to look forward to are the Sequence 2 work that'll look at the Civic Center, the I-405 crossing in Wilburton, as well as other implementation efforts that are ongoing. I'd like to now please turn things over to Christina Gallant, the project manager for the Grand Connection Design Guidelines and Standards.
Thank you, Emil. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and members of the council. I'll now walk through just a brief presentation outlining a reminder of some of the key components of this LUCA. So the Grand Connection, as you know, is a people-focused, interactive, connected experience through the heart of Bellevue. And this evening, we are seeking council action to adopt ordinance number 6580. Tonight, I'll be walking through a bit of detail on the Grand Connection initiative, as Emil introduced, then some of the objectives for the LUCA that we are bringing forward today, followed by a summary of our outreach and engagement efforts so far, the structure of the LUCA itself, and then finally going to action. So first, the Grand Connection Initiative is a broad project that will be implemented through a number of strategies and LUCAs, including tonight's LUCA with design guidelines and standards for Sequence 1. There will be other projects to follow to activate the Grand Connection, working on intersection improvements, wayfinding, and a number of future projects that are impacting but not necessarily directly part of the Grand Connection, such as the I-405 lid concept and Civic Center. So Sequence 1, again, is the area extending from Maidenbower Bay Park north and east to 110th. And then Sequence 2 to the east, you can see those connections to other future projects. So the objectives for this specific LUCA were to implement certain elements of the Grand Connection Framework Plan and Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And our goal was to update the pedestrian corridor major public open space design guidelines that had previously been a very large document, kind of accessory to the code, which we have now implemented just the essential design guidelines to reflect this updated Grand Connection vision within the code itself to both have refreshed design guidelines and provide much simpler, easier to navigate content. So our update process began in 2020, where we worked with the Planning Commission to develop our initial LUCA structure. Then we went forward to work with a number of stakeholders, testing the draft LUCA with some of our active projects underway, and then finally going back to focus groups to refine the draft further. And that culminated in the Planning Commission recommendation back in April, which brings us to today. We've implemented a number of strategies for outreach and engagement, in addition to the basic requirements for a process for project. We did look back to the 2017 framework plan process to learn from that engagement. We did ongoing testing with projects, and we worked with a number of focus groups, external stakeholders with direct connections to the Grand Connection to make sure the design guidelines and recommendations were most relevant. So the LUCA itself, the core of it is this new section 2025A175. You see the 5 subsections here. They include general design requirements that apply throughout the Grand Connection Sequence 1, as well as specific guidance for the rooms, which are the concept we're using to implement some kind of local character within the overarching character of the Grand Connection, reflecting some of the variation we already have in celebrating it. There are also a number of conformance amendments as well. These generally serve to integrate our new design guidelines, references to the Grand Connection, etc., as well as some cleanups for clarity. So thank you. We kept it brief tonight. Again, staff is seeking council action to adopt ordinance number 6580. And we are now ready for your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions? I see Deputy Mayor and I see Council Member Stokes. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor and Zahn.
I would like to be heard as well.
And Council Member Robertson. So we'll start with Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the great presentation and update there as well in terms of the Grand Connection. I just wanted to go back to one of the comments during oral communications. I believe his name was Larry Martin, representing Alex Smith. And he made a comment that there was an error that I just would like you to address, if that truly was an error, or perhaps it wasn't an error or unintended error, but it's in regards to the transfer FAR, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, but saying that it should have gone all the way to 112th, I guess, immediately, and this stops at 110. So Emil, just to clear the record there, can you address that to a certain extent?
Welcome to do so, Deputy Mayor. So the current East Side Center is what it's referred to in downtown, extends from 100th Avenue, which is the road on the west side of Bellevue Way, right, over to the freeway, and then bound on the north by Northeast 8th and the south by Northeast 4th. So it's essentially, it's the center third of downtown, kind of going east-west direction. Okay. In 2017, when we updated the downtown land use code for the downtown livability amendments, we did try and kind of identify what amenities were pertinent in different neighborhoods. And we did list the Ped Corridor at the time as being a amenity that you could use in the East Side Center. It is able to be used in part of it right now, but not the entire area, even under the current code. So just as an example, the current Ped Corridor guidelines go from Bellevue Way over to 110th area. So I understand Mr. Martin's comments. I don't think it would be exactly, at least portrayed by me, as an error in 2017. I think we were trying to cross-reference the Ped Corridor amenity and what neighborhood it applied to. That being said, his request is something that would be looked at in the sequence 2 work when we go back and look at the overall East Side Center area, what the guidelines might mean down in that area of downtown, and how the transfer provisions might want to be amended in the future. For this process, we just didn't have it as part of the scope, part of this work. That's why it wasn't part of the recommendation. It had come up at the Planning Commission review, but ultimately was not recommended by that body to forward on to council.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation. And you mentioned sequence 2. So when it, I know there's a lot of work in front of us right now, but roughly when do you think sequence 2 might get going, and what would sequence 2 all entail?
Sequence 2 is a council priority for the 2021, 22, 23 timeframe. So clearly we want to respect that council direction to work on it in that timeframe. I mentioned this work right now as a major milestone because we are wrapping up a significant body of work, as well as the East Main work that's still to be wrapped up. So then that frees up our staff in community development and development services to then move on to Wilburton, Bellred look back. It will be a question in the Wilburton effort if we'd like to do both sides of the freeway as part of that look, because as you know, the opportunities for connecting the downtown and Wilburton make sense to look at that vis-a-vis the Wilburton and downtown areas. So I think it will be a council discussion item when we want to do the so-called civic center work after we wrap up the sequence 1 work and the East Main work that still remains to be wrapped up.
Great, thank you so much.
Councilmember Stokes. I'm afraid your microphone's off.
That does help, doesn't it?
There you go.
No, that was the deputy mayor's question was interesting, and I do know we're basically talking about from 110th west on this, and as you say, there are 2 sequences in that, and I think that helps a lot to look at the whole project. But I'm just really excited to be getting to this point. And it's taken a while to get from the Grand Connection. The original one has been around for a long time, but me moving up into this one and talking about going over, we've been talking about that since 2012. And it's not so far away, but it's a lot of time. And I'm just so excited to see this actually happening, and really great work on this. I don't have any questions on it. I think you've outlined everything very well, and you have it set up to concentrate on the sequence 1 piece, and then at the appropriate time, the sequence 2. And I appreciate your comments in terms of how we balance all these things that are going on. We have so much going on right now. And the other thing I'm excited about is seeing the East Rail connection to that. I'm glad we put that in there, because that's a big part of this. It makes the connection even grander. So thanks very much. Really good work, all 3 staff members, and I'm looking forward to us putting this in place and moving forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Stokes. I mean, this is a lot of work that staff has done. And I counted up 8 stakeholder briefings that you did, as well as focus groups, to get us to this point, and excited to vote in support of this and get this moving. Now, with that said, I do think that as we talk about the timing for sequence 2, perhaps as we get ready for a mid-buy budget, that we should be talking about, do we have the right amount of resources for all of the planning that we have ahead of us? And if sequence 2, that we need to also move this along quicker, along with Wilburton and Bell Red Look Back, then we might need to just talk about how to get more resources to do that, because my sense is that, you know, there's some urgency in so much of this planning work that we're doing. I am concerned about adding anything else to this work right now and slowing it down, especially since we've done so much briefings and focus group and outreach to get to having design guidelines and standards. So that would be maybe my ask to city manager, is whether, as we look at our budget going forward, we talk about what additional resources if we want to move sequence 2 even quicker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. Sorry for being late. I was on an airplane and just got off. That's why I can't be on video yet. So yeah, I'm excited that this work is being done. I'm definitely supportive of getting the Grand Connection going. As Councilmember Stokes says, we've been talking about this since 2012. That's 9 years. But I'd like to give a little context and some history, because this is sequence 1. It goes to Northeast 10th. The FAR transfer that was discussed in the public comment and was advocated for at the Planning Commission is a leftover vestige of the code from before downtown livability was opened or was finished in 2017. And at that time, the downtown boundaries went to 112th. During downtown livability, those boundaries were expanded to 405. The former OLB zone that was not considered really part of downtown is now wrapped into part of downtown. I think it was a mistake. I mean, and I'm not saying a mistake as in they made the wrong decision, a mistake as in it was overlooked to include the FAR transfer all the way to 405. And so it's fully within our bailiwick and within our authority to make a housekeeping correction today. And I would point out that this is sequence 1 goes to 110th. The code section that we're talking about goes to 112. So it's either wrong in that it's further than sequence 1, or it's wrong in that it doesn't go to the downtown boundaries. In either case, 112th is the wrong demarcation line. And I think that given how long we have taken to do so many changes with our land use code, with our comp plan, when we have something in front of us that we have the authority to fix, we should do it. And that this is one of those things. So let me tell you why I think we should do it, other than just correcting the error. Number two is we have talked, I mean, I know that all of my colleagues, Councilmember Zahn has talked about this, Councilmember Stokes has talked about this, and Mayor Robinson, all of us have talked about the need to make sure that we set the table for really good TOD, for housing, for mixed use development that takes advantage of the light rail investments. Downtown light rail between 112th and 110th on Northeast 6th is opening in somewhere between 12 and 24 months. I have absolutely no confidence that we would get to sequence 2 of the Grand Connection guidelines, even within 5 years of that, because we have so many things in the queue ahead of it. So to me, setting the table to allow the property that are within the downtown corridor to use the FAR transfer is the right thing to do. Number one, it makes it so that they're more likely to develop TOD and have the density we need. We need more housing. We need another convention hotel. Those things are going to be a lot more likely if we allow the FAR transfer. Number two, it's going to make people who are on the corridor who may not be able to use all the FAR they're going to gain more enthusiastic about building the Grand Connection, because then they have a market for it. They can sell it, get some of that money back. So to me, it makes all the sense in the world from an economic, from a development, from a pro-housing perspective, and from a housekeeping. Let's fix the code when it's in front of us rather than wait 5 years to fix the code. We know it's a mistake. We know it's not 110th, it's not 405, it's somewhere in between. It's just a mistake, and we should fix it. We have the authority to do it tonight by vote. I would make a motion to do so if there's any support whatsoever for that. The time is now to do it if we want to see that development. So I support the guidelines, I support doing it, but I support actually passing a ordinance that doesn't have a mistake built into it. And this ordinance does have a mistake that was prior to downtown livability built into it. We need to fix it.
Thank you. Councilmember Barksdale, did you want to ask a question or did you have a comment?
Sure, I'll chime in. I am curious from staff what impact making a change to the land use code to fix this might have on the timeline. My thought is, I think I'd prefer that we proceed tonight, and even if it's something that comes before sequence 2 or or as part of sequence 2, that we don't hold up this land use code amendment. But good to hear from staff.
Councilmember Barksdale, maybe I'll jump in on this and hand it over to Emil King to give some more particulars. Studying the addition of FAR and the impacts of that type of growth is actually a pretty significant thing. So the idea of deciding to look at how big or how intense buildings should be allowed to be has impacts for transportation systems, utility systems, urban form, how you want your city to grow, and so forth. And that's not to say it's good or bad, but to answer your question about timing, it would definitely, it's a different scope of work or concept than what you're taking up tonight. So taking up tonight are design considerations for the ground plane. So what should the Grand Connection look like? How should private property interact with the Grand Connection so that it becomes a placemaking opportunity for the community broadly? The concept that you're talking about now is a scenario of transfer of development rights and adding extra density and intensity, making buildings bigger, which has a different set of impacts than what you're taking up tonight. So why don't I stop there? I'll hand it to Assistant Director King, and he can talk about a few of those things and what we would do should the council want us to take up that other initiative.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cummins. Just to elaborate a little bit more as we've kind of thought about this comment from Mr. Smith and Mr. Martin. The Alex Smith's property is about 73,000 square feet, and their idea was to also include the legacy properties that are on the south side of it, and that's about 150,000 square feet of land area. So when we would look at this for additional FAR, we would be looking at things like the urban form analysis of what would happen if additional FAR landed on these sites in addition to the upzones that we did in 2017. We would at least do a quick check if there were any transportation considerations. I don't think there would be significant ones, but that's another lens that we typically look on if we're putting more FAR in an area. So those are probably the two things that we would look at. And again, this is something that we would need to do at some point in the future. I think the question is, the timing of it. We view it as more appropriate to do in the sequence 2, but clearly there's discussions about what if scenarios of trying to do it earlier than that.
Okay, thank you. I would be up for proceeding tonight and figuring out another time to work on this.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions. It seems to me that the issue at hand is just redefining the boundary, moving it from 112th to 405. Isn't that what the developer is asking?
Yeah, Mr. Smith and Mr. Martin are asking to expand the FAR transfer area from 112th over to the freeway. So in effect, it adds Alex's property and the legacy property that's to the south to an area that can receive excess FAR that's developed when you're building out the Grand Connection or major public open spaces, such as Compass Plaza and the soon-to-be Ani part of it. So that's the core of their ask, is to expand the area that you can have density transferred to.
Is there not another question after that happens as to how much FAR can be transferred or how much density? Or is that just once you decide to expand it to 405, then a whole bunch of things just follow suit?
Hey, Mayor, maybe I'll jump in. One of the interesting things that we're hearing now is people want to talk about transfer of development rights in general. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of different ideas about how that might work, either within the downtown or just citywide. Some people have offered transfer of development rights as a way to talk about creating additional housing. So a significant question for you and the council is, should you take up expansion of a TDR program, would you want to keep all the same rules exactly as written? So they were written assuming the pedestrian corridor, just a very finite period of or place in downtown along Northeast 6th. Expanding that concept for a portion of or all the way through the whole Grand Connection route, and whether or not those downtown rules make sense, those are pretty significant value conversations for you all.
Okay. So when I look at the rooms of the Grand Connection, it's surprising to me that it stops where it does. And it seems like we're missing rooms. And I assume that in the sequence 2, you'll be adding rooms to encompass 112th and going across the freeway, connecting to the East Trail. Is that correct?
100% correct.
Okay. So my last question is, if we were to, so I hear the benefit of waiting until sequence 2 to talk about the, the give and take of transferring FAR and how we want to see that happen. How much does this delay the developers' projects if we wait until sequence 2? Is that within a timeline that they can work with for their projects?
Liz, would you like to speak about any the active projects we have in this area?
Yeah, I can just kind of from a high level speak. We have been seeing a lot of development in this area. Thus far, it has not been hindering anything to date. I can't speak specifically to Mr. Smith or Mr. Smith's proposed project, but we have had development proposals on almost every lot within that area, some of which are completing their design review process right now and heading toward construction. So I would say that we have seen developers be able to use the existing code to create a very successful project.
So if we were to make this change tonight, would that disrupt the timeline of these other projects?
No.
Oh, it does not. Okay, well, that's good. Okay, any other questions or comments? Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure we have this all straight. It's part of one of the responses seemed to indicate that this was just a small piece of land that had this ability to transfer the FAR. Is that correct, or is it all along the corridor? I mean, there've been some different, discussions, and part of the proposal is because other people up and down the corridor can do it, we ought to be able to do it too. Or is this just a very, very small special circumstance? That's one question I have.
Currently, all properties between Bellevue Way, 112, 4th, and 8th can have FAR transferred to those properties. And that was a vestige of the prior pedestrian corridor design guidelines. So the Planning Commission did not analyze changes to those provisions, didn't recommend any to council. It was outside of the scope of their work. So the language that's in the ordinance is essentially carryover language from the previous pedestrian corridor design guidelines.
And so because we went from one designation to another, how did this particular piece get carved out of that?
It was not carved out. It's just that this Mr. Smith's property and the legacy property was never part of the FAR transfer area.
Okay, well, that's yeah, because I don't think that's been very clear in the discussions. I mean, my feeling is that we probably think this is a positive thing to do in a way, but what would the impact is to really get down to in trying to make this decision? If the kind of consensus was to allow this, but the question is this the appropriate time, or what other impact is this going to have on other projects, or is one question. And the other one is, if we can get this, if we don't pass it tonight, but put together a plan to amend, which we can do, the code, at some later date, how long would that take, and how would that would this be put off 5 years? I can't see that would happen. It seems to me we have a pathway either way. In fact, I've forgotten the attorney's name, but the representative clearly stated in there there's several options we could take, and either of those seem to be acceptable, including the count sending it back to the Planning Commission, or having the council go ahead and decide it at a later date. So I'm just trying to get a sense of, I don't want to be pushed to make a decision just because somebody wants it. That's fine. And as I say, I'm not feeling any negatives in the long run, except that if this just adds to the consideration of what the impact will be with a much, much denser development. On the other hand, we're looking at, in context of what is where denser development is good. So it's a balance. And it seems to me what we're trying to figure out is how's the best way in terms of use of staff and time and coordination to do this. And, this stops at 110th. It's not going over to 112th at this point. Is that right? In this sequence 1? So
yes, that's correct.
So I'm not even sure why, to a certain extent, it's interesting that we're talking about something that's not currently in the plan. So we would be doing something that's over the other line in sequence 2, now in sequence 1. And I'm concerned, are we going to have more pressure by people along the route to start working on sequence 2 now? And, in other words, I'm just looking at how can we most effectively, orderly make this happen, if that's a good thing to do, and not get bogged down in this, how many on the head of a needle type thing. In terms of staffing, in terms of impact this is going to have on things like Wilburton, East Main, all the other Belgrade, all the other things we're concerned about adding on, as you mentioned, Emil, it's going to take some work to look at when you get to it, to how this should be applied and all that. And so I'm just, what is the thing that's most effective for us to do now that really, I think, doesn't put the developer in a really awkward position? I think either way it goes, it's going to be fine.
So Councilmember Stokes, maybe I will attempt to answer a few questions I think I heard come out in there.
Okay.
And one of the questions you were asking about was prioritization, and then where does this fit, and how, and what are the staffing impacts, and that sort of thing. And then I also heard a question about potentially council, what would happen if you tried to, or took vote tonight, on this versus remanded it to staff, and so forth. So I'll try to hit both of those.
Right.
The concepts of adding extra FAR and evaluating the impacts of what that might do in terms of the things that Assistant Director King was talking about is something that we would recommend that you have some feedback on, some study and analysis before taking action in any event. What was discussed and moved through the process and then went to the Planning Commission were design considerations around the rooms that you heard Ms. Gallant and Mr. King comment on earlier. That's like, what type of treatments are on the ground itself? Where are the sitting areas going to be? What types of landscape are going to be out there? Like how are the design going to work between private and public property? Studying and evaluating extra FAR is something we would suggest that we come back to you with. It's almost a different body of work than what you're taking up tonight. So in order to help you with question 2, which is the prioritization question, we would want to talk with several departments, including the city attorney's office, about how to bring back a change like this in terms of what has been published, in the draft ordinances and so forth, because this concept has not been put out there, at all, other than a letter that came into the Planning Commission, but they didn't have discussion as we talked about, and then of course tonight. So on a rough order of magnitude, of course, this would depend on if council wanted to remand the whole concept back to the Planning Commission or have it just stay with the council. That's a big influencer on timing. And then we would want to get with the affected departments by the concept of adding extra FAR and do some analysis and bring that back to you so that as you took up that question, you would have all the facts in front of you.
Well, to follow up on that last part, and I'm trying to see how this all works. So if we said tonight we would like to, make this change, but it sounds like we're the work on getting, how this, what the FAR should be, what the impact of whatever, scope of development they want to do is not something we're doing with other developers at this point. And if we said, okay, let's go ahead with this, make the change in the outline tonight, it doesn't mean that we have to immediately start working on the project with Mr. Smith. And that would be, could we do this at the same time we do this with other people who are already vested with this opportunity for, trading for for more density? I mean, I'm just trying to see how we could do this in a way that would not have a negative effect on staffing work right now.
I think the way I would best answer that, Councilman Stokes, it would definitely have an impact on staffing if council wanted to take up the question of studying additional FAR in some or all of the OLB land. The first part of your question, when do we normally do this? We normally do this as part of large planning or upzoning initiatives. So in sequence, going back in time, we did this in the Downtown Livability Initiative and actually added substantial amounts of FAR on these parcels in the OLB land between 112th and the freeway. We're currently evaluating and studying FARs for East Main, which is the next in the sequence. And as part of the big upzoning, what should those numbers be and how does everything work together? And then the next one after that will be Wilburton. There isn't a great place to go back and surgically do one parcel at a time in terms of what the right FAR should be or how transfers should work. We're suggesting that if the council wants to take this up, the most logical place to do it would be sequence 2, because obviously the only other way to do it would be to take up downtown zoning, like reopen the downtown land use code. So that's where this requirement currently resides.
But if we said, okay, we approve the concept tonight, could that not just be placed into sequence 2 in terms of the work that's being done?
Yes, and we were assuming that this would be an issue that would come up, and if we're assuming council would want to continue to take it up, it would be just built into the sequence 2 work program.
Okay.
But I think Councilmember Stokes would want to know, should we take action tonight to do that, or is that another time?
Mayor, we would not recommend that you take action tonight to change the code.
Mm-hmm.
In any event, we would recommend that you have some analysis done if you'd like to think about a transfer of development rights expansion concept. And we'd be happy to bring that back to you. Of course, we would need to dedicate some resources to do that. We have not been studying that to date.
Are there any other potential landowners along that would want to take advantage of that as well? I mean, is this just a very unique piece, or is this something that when we open this up, other people be interested in being involved?
That's a great question, Councilman Stokes, and then I'll hand it back to Mr. Miyake. We hear the question frequently. We didn't solicit input from property owners and developers on that topic.
Yeah.
So the answer is this is the only person we've heard from, but we didn't ask either as part of the scoping exercise.
So if I may just weigh in, often you've referred to the requirement. I was wondering if our city attorney could weigh in on this in terms of reasonable notification and the legal implications on that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. So I think Mr. Cummins alluded to this. I think there is at least a question here that we would want to take back and evaluate for the council as to whether or not, if there's a modification being done tonight, was that reasonably foreseeable as part of the notice that was given to the public or not, because that may impact the legal obligation to actually give notice to the public if this is was not a topic that was reasonably foreseeable when it went through the process. It's part of the Growth Management Act, public participation obligations.
Thank you. I'm gonna ask some questions here, and then we'll go back around if anybody else is interested. Going off of what Councilmember Stokes said, I think he brought up a really good point that this is not even in sequence 1. This is a sequence 2 property that is scheduled to be examined. And there's 2 things that are missing here for me. One is, what are we going to be doing about affordable housing requirements here in one of the hottest TOD areas in the city? And so it's going to be really important to have that conversation. And then the other part is what I mentioned before, we haven't even defined those rooms yet that have yet to be named, going from 1/10 over to the East Trail. So I don't feel comfortable moving this forward tonight, but I am interested in seeing, that we are on a schedule that serves the developers. But we need to have a bigger conversation, in my opinion, and we need to schedule that. So are there any other comments or questions? Councilmember Zahn, and then Councilmember Robertson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I agree with both your comments and Councilmember Stokes. I want to make sure that we move forward with sequence 1. And I do agree that there's a broader conversation here about transfer of development rights and FAR transfer. And especially since we've had 8 stakeholder briefings and focus groups, to add this now seems like we're not doing what we are very good at doing, which is being a very thoughtful council, that when we look at changing code, that we have the conversation, we have the analysis, we understand all the implications associated with it. And trying to insert something right now really is not in line with that thoughtful nature of really understanding all of the pieces. So I go back to, I guess, my comment the first round, which is, if this is something we want to look at of transfer of development rights in a more broad sense, then maybe as we look at the mid-buy and resources that we might need to do that type of work, of how we put that into our work plan, but just putting it in here tonight, I would not support that. Thank you.
Councilmember Robertson.
Thank you. So to me, it's a housekeeping issue. The sequence 1 ends at 1/10. The FAR transfer area ends at 1/12. The boundaries end at I-405. So to me, it's just a fix. And it was just, we have this section of land use code in front of us. This section of land use code was in front of the Planning Commission. People testified during the public hearing about it. I think we have the right to change it tonight. It sounds like we don't have the political will to change it tonight. And, you know, if we want to see the development that we've talked about, making sure that we can make the changes when things are in front of us is the most effective way to do it. We do not need to send this back to staff to do a bunch of analysis and bring it back and drag it out. We can make this housekeeping amendment tonight, take care of it. Then it allows a couple of, you know, property. There's 2 properties, I think, 2 property owners that were inadvertently left out. I mean, it was a mistake when we did downtown livability. I just want to fix it. But I see that there's not the political courage to do that tonight. And so I think it sounds like we're going to pass this with a mistake in it, which is okay. I guess, you know, people don't want to fix mistakes, but that's okay. It's, you know, next time people complain about not getting stuff done, I want people to remember this moment because we had the chance to change it. It was in front of us. Now's the time we can do it. If we don't want to, that's fine.
So I will say that, first of all, I think using the word political courage is a little unfair. We're being very thoughtful. Right. And I don't know actually where the council sits on this. So I'm not going to guess that we're all yes or no. I don't know at this point. And we're going around. We've heard your opinion. Does anybody else have an opinion right now that they'd like to give? All right. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, I do think, given that it does relate to the transfer of development rights and the work that we would want to do, to Councilmember Zah's point of being thoughtful, like there are developers on both sides of this, right? Like if we delay the guidelines, there are also developers who will be impacted by that as well. So.
Right. Okay. Deputy Mayor, do you have any more final comment here, or do you want to make a motion?
No, I appreciate the conversation. I think there's a number of good points being made here. I mean, I do agree with Councilmember Zahn. We are a very, I think, thoughtful, deliberate, data-driven council, and we really want to understand all the evidence before us, if you will, as well as the work plan, et cetera. On the other hand, it does, it does feel somewhat like it's housekeeping, but that housekeeping could have a dramatic effect on that area as well. And I think taking a little bit additional time for staff to take a look and come back to us, if there's any way that we could expedite it, I think that would be within all of our best interests to do so, given the priorities and given the goals of this council in terms of the transit-oriented development and affordable housing, et cetera. So if there is a way to move this forward, just this piece forward a little bit quicker, maybe outside of sequence 2, but if it can't be, and it needs to be in part of sequence 2, fair enough. But if we could expedite that, I think that would be great, because there is so much development happening right now. We do not want to lose out on any opportunities to create those affordable housing opportunities and other development opportunities at this time, because we couldn't get one particular code updated. So I would leave it at that. Would you like me to make a motion, Mayor?
Frozen.
Issue frozen?
Yeah, I think so.
Technology is great, isn't it?
Okay, I think she's going to try and reconnect. The mayor's back.
I can't hear. Oh, I got my headphones. Just a sec.
We can hear you.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm wondering, have we voted?
No.
No, we have not. I waited for you to reconnect before putting that motion forward.
I appreciate that. I was wondering if there was going to be an amendment to the motion made, and I'm not seeing that. So go ahead, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead and make the motion.
I move to adopt ordinance 6580, amending various subsections of chapter 20.25A of the land use code as specified in the packet.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciated the discussion, really did. And I'm sorry for all my technical failures tonight. It's been a challenge, but we got through it. And our meeting is adjourned. Good night.